Trump's tariff deadline. Countries with deals versus those without. The deadline for President Trump's new tariff hikes is fast approaching, and this looming deadline threatens to inject even more economic uncertainty into global trade. But here's where it gets controversial. Some countries have managed to strike deals with the U.S., securing lower tariff rates, while others have been left out in the cold, facing much steeper barriers. The consequences could reshape international commerce for years to come. Originally, the Trump administration postponed higher tariffs multiple times, pushing back deadlines from the initial Liberation Day on April 2nd, then July 9th, and now ultimately set for August 1st. These repeated delays sparked hopes for many nations seeking relief, but the reality has been mixed. Back in April, President Trump declared in a Time magazine interview that more than 200 trade agreements had been made. His trade advisor, Peter Navarro, boldly predicted 90 deals in 90 days. Yet, as we approach the current deadline, only 8 agreements have been finalized in over 4 months, just a fraction of the ambitious goal. Most notably, including a pact with the European Union's 27 member countries. Let's explore which countries have sealed a deal, and who still faces the threat of steeper tariffs. The UK led the pack with its trade agreement signed in early May. The deal set a baseline 10% tariff on British goods, along with specific quotas and exemptions for key industries like automobiles and aerospace. Even after a recent high-profile meeting between Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Scotland, some aspects of this agreement remain unsettled. Notably, tariffs on UK steel and aluminum, which the US pledged to reduce, are still under negotiation. The ongoing dispute. Vietnam followed closely behind, with a significant tariff reduction announced on July 2nd. Under the agreement, tariffs on Vietnamese exports to the U.S. dropped sharply from 46% to 20%. However, a contentious trans-shipping tariff of 40% was introduced on goods originating from other countries but shipped via Vietnam, targeting practices where Chinese manufacturers funnel shipments through Vietnam to avoid U.S. tariffs. The manner in which this will be enforced is still unclear. Interestingly, Vietnamese officials reportedly expected an 11% tariff, only to be surprised by Trump's unilateral announcement of a higher 20% rate. This discrepancy exposed the complexity and unpredictability of these negotiations. Indonesia secured a hefty tariff cut from 32% down to 19%, with the White House emphasizing the removal of tariff barriers on over 99% of U.S. exports to the country, covering everything from agriculture to energy. The framework also commits to addressing non-tariff barriers, which often include regulatory hurdles or bureaucratic red tape that can stifle trade. The Philippines, however, saw only a marginal decrease. Tariffs dipped by just 1 percentage point from 20% to 19% on July 22nd. Despite this modest shift, Trump hailed the Philippines for moving toward an open market relationship and mentioned plans for closer military cooperation. Though details were scarce, this military collaboration echoes the long-standing 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty and the presence of U.S. troops in the country. Japan struck a landmark deal, cutting tariffs from 25% to 15%, and became the first major economy to see preferential treatment on automobiles with lower tariff rates. Trump praised this as one of the largest deals ever, citing commitments that Japan would invest $550 billion in the U.S., with 90% of the profits benefiting Americans. However, just days before the announcement, Trump had expressed doubt about reaching an agreement, even calling Japan very tough in trade negotiations, and criticizing the country for maintaining strict rice import policies despite domestic shortages. The European Union finalized a deal only recently, setting tariffs at 15%, halving the 30% rates Trump had initially threatened. Auto tariffs and duties on aircraft and certain medications would return to pre-January levels. Yet this agreement has been divisive within Europe. French Prime Minister François Bayrou, denounced it as submission and a dark day, while EU Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic described it as the best result achievable under tough circumstances. South Korea became the latest country to sign on, agreeing to a 15% tariff rate similar to Japan's. Including the auto sector, Trump highlighted Korean President Lee Jae-myung, however, emphasized that this fund would help Korean companies expand into U.S. industries such as shipbuilding and semiconductors, showcasing how these deals intertwine economic and strategic interests. China stands apart as the major outlier. Unlike other nations, it has yet to secure a comprehensive deal and remains at the center of volatile tariff exchanges. Initially slapped with a 34% tariff, tit-for-tat hikes led rates to soar as high as 145% on Chinese imports into the U.S. and 125% for American exports to China. A brief truce in May led to reductions, currently at 30% combined tariffs for China and about 10% for U.S. For countries without a formal deal, the outlook is bleak, with Trump signaling a new global baseline tariff between 15% and 20%, significantly above the initial 10% rate promised earlier. Among the key countries still without an agreement, India faces a 25% tariff, plus an unspecified penalty over what Trump sees as unfair trade practices and India's ongoing military and energy deals with Russia. Despite being a strategic partner, trade remains tense, and Trump points to India's historically high tariffs as justification. Canada is in a tense stalemate, with a looming 35% tariff on various Canadian goods starting August 1st. Trump also threatened to hike rates further if Canada responds with retaliatory tariffs. Talks are described as being in an intense phase, but Canada's Prime Minister acknowledges some tariffs may be unavoidable. Mexico, similarly, is set to face a 30% tariff. The U.S. cites concerns over drug trafficking and border security as reasons for the levies. Mexico has urged quicker resolution but shows little progress. Australia currently remains at the 10% baseline tariff due to its trade deficit with the U.S. But there are warnings from Washington that this could rise if Trump raises the baseline tariff. Despite no public trade talks, Australia relaxed restrictions on U.S. beef recently, which the U.S. credits to Trump, though Australian officials deny the move was linked to U.S. pressure. This complex patchwork of agreements, partial deals, and ongoing disputes reveals a world navigating choppy trade waters. With tariffs poised to increase for many countries, the